Inside a Texas Supermax prison, no mercy. Out here, there are no neighbors. No cities. No noise. No witnesses. Just miles of empty Texas land, and a prison designed to disappear people without ever making them physically vanish. From the outside, it looks controlled. Quiet. Almost ordinary. But inside, control takes on a different meaning. Because this is not a place built to punish behavior. It's built to contain human beings who have already proven they cannot be controlled anywhere else. Men who led gangs from behind bars. Men who attacked guards without warning. Men whose presence alone turned entire prisons into war zones. So the system responded by building something stronger. Something colder. Something final. A place where movement is restricted, voices are reduced to echoes, and time itself begins to dissolve. A place where mercy isn't part of the design. And once you're inside, you don't just serve time. You endure it. Why this place exists. Before places like this existed, even maximum security prisons struggled to maintain control. Violence wasn't occasional. It was constant. In the 1980s and 90s, prison systems across the United States faced a growing problem. Certain inmates weren't just breaking rules, they were rewriting them. Gang leaders continued running operations from inside their cells. Orders were passed, hits were carried out, and entire prison populations were influenced by a few individuals. Transfers didn't work. Punishments didn't work. Isolation units existed, but they weren't enough. Because even within traditional segregation, inmates could still communicate, still influence, still organize. And that made them dangerous. Not just to other inmates, but to the system itself. So a new idea emerged. What if you removed not just freedom, but connection? What if you designed a prison where influence couldn't spread, because contact barely existed? That idea became reality in places like Texas Supermax units. Facilities where inmates are locked down nearly 24 hours a day. Where movement is controlled to the second. Where even eye contact is limited. But here's the part most people don't realize. This level of control doesn't just affect behavior. It affects the human mind. And once that process begins, it doesn't stop easily. The arrival, when everything changes. The moment an inmate arrives here, everything shifts. There's no dramatic announcement. No explanation. Just procedure. The bus doors open, and one by one, inmates step out, shackled at the wrists, waist, and ankles. Their movements are slow, restricted, deliberate. Not by choice, but by design. Orders are given in short, controlled commands. Step forward. Stop. Turn. There's no conversation. No acknowledgement. Because here, communication is not casual. It's controlled. Inside intake, the process continues. Clothing is removed. Replaced with standard-issued garments. Personal belongings are taken. Stored, logged, or sometimes lost in the system entirely. Photos. Letters. Anything that ties them to the outside world. Gone. And then comes the moment that matters most. The walk. Down a corridor that looks identical in every direction. Doors on both sides. Each one leading to a space that will soon become everything. Because once that final door closes, there is no adjustment period. No transition. Just immediate, complete isolation. And for many, that's when reality begins to settle in. This isn't temporary. This isn't a phase. This is the new normal. The cell, a controlled existence. The cell is small. But its impact isn't. At first glance, it seems simple. A bed. A toilet. A sink. A light. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. Everything designed to serve a function. But what defines this space isn't what's inside it. It's what's missing. There are no bars, only a solid steel door. No clear window, just a narrow slit. No sound of people nearby, only distant echoes. And most importantly, no human presence. Inmates spend 22 to 23 hours a day inside this space. Alone. Meals are delivered through a slot. 3 times a day. The slot opens. A tray slides in. The slot closes. That brief interaction, often lasting just seconds, may be the only direct human contact they experience all day. There are no conversations. No handshakes. No shared spaces. And over time, the silence becomes something else. At first, it feels like peace. Then it becomes discomfort. Then it becomes pressure. Because when the world goes quiet, your thoughts don't. And what happens inside the mind can be far louder than anything outside. Time, the invisible force. Time inside a Supermax prison doesn't move the way it does outside. There are no watches. No phones. No clear markers. Just routine. And even that begins to blur. Days become difficult to track. One blends into the next. Morning feels like evening. Evening feels like something in between. Some inmates try to create structure, counting meals, marking walls, tracking days in their heads. Others stop trying altogether, because eventually, the effort becomes exhausting. And when time loses its structure, something deeper begins to shift. Motivation fades. Focus weakens. Memory changes. Because without variation, without interaction, without movement, the brain has less to process. And when that happens, it starts turning inward, replaying thoughts, revisiting memories, amplifying emotions, and sometimes, creating things that aren't there. But this isn't where the pressure ends. Because even the smallest changes in routine can carry consequences. Control, every movement matters. Nothing inside this prison happens by accident. Every movement is planned. Every action is monitored. If an inmate leaves the cell, for any reason, it follows a strict process. Hands cuffed behind the back. Leg restraints secured. Multiple officers present. Commands given clearly and repeated if necessary. The walk itself is short, controlled, silent. Because unpredictability is not allowed. Even something as simple as a medical visit or shower is treated as a security event. Doors open and close in sequence. One barrier at a time. Never 2 points of access at once. It's called a controlled movement system. And it ensures that at no point does the inmate have freedom of motion. But here's the part that often goes unnoticed. This level of control doesn't just prevent violence. It eliminates spontaneity. There are no unexpected moments. No decisions to make. No choices to consider. And over time, that absence of choice begins to affect something deeper. Because when every action is controlled, you stop acting for yourself. Recreation, a different kind of freedom. The word recreation suggests relief, movement, freedom. But here, it means something else. Inmates are escorted, one at a time, to individual cages. Concrete floors. High fences. No shared space. No interaction. Just isolation, outdoors. For some, it's the only time they see the sky. The only time they feel direct sunlight. The only time the air feels different. And yet, even here, the rules remain. No contact. No communication. No deviation. Some walk in circles. Others stand still. Some look up and stay there, staring at the sky as if trying to remember something they've lost. Because after enough time inside a concrete cell, even the open air can feel unfamiliar. And when that hour ends, it ends quickly. Back through the same process. Back through the same doors. Back into the same space. Where the silence is waiting. By now, the structure is clear. Isolation. Control. Routine. But what happens when pressure builds inside a system like this? What happens when silence turns into frustration? And frustration has nowhere to go? Because in a place designed to eliminate chaos, something unexpected begins to form. Not in groups. Not in crowds. But in individuals. And what happens next is something the system cannot always predict. Pressure, when silence turns against you. At first, silence feels like control. Then it becomes weight. In a place where there are no conversations, no distractions, no interruptions, the mind begins to fill the gaps on its own. Thoughts repeat, over and over. Small memories grow larger. Regrets become sharper. Anger lingers longer than it should. And with nowhere to release it, pressure builds. Some inmates develop strict personal routines just to stay grounded. Push-ups against concrete floors. Walking back and forth in measured steps. Reading the same page repeatedly until it sticks. Others begin to lose structure. Sleep patterns break. Days and nights reverse. Time stops feeling real. And when that happens, the mind starts searching for something to hold on to. Sometimes it finds memories. Sometimes it finds fear. And sometimes, it creates something entirely new. Voices that aren't there. Movements in the corner of the eye. A sense that someone is watching even when no one is. This isn't rare. It's documented. Long-term isolation changes brain function. It alters perception. It reduces the ability to distinguish between internal thought and external reality. And once that line starts to blur, it becomes very difficult to bring it back. But here's what makes it even more complicated. Because inside these walls, showing weakness can be just as dangerous as losing control. Invisible networks, power without presence. Isolation was meant to eliminate influence. But influence adapts. Inside Supermax units, communication doesn't disappear. It evolves. Inmates develop methods to pass messages without ever seeing each other. Notes folded into impossibly small shapes. Words whispered through plumbing systems. Codes tapped through walls in patterns only a few understand. Even the smallest opportunity becomes a channel. A food tray. a laundry exchange, a moment during escort. And through these channels, information flows. Names, instructions, warnings. Because even in isolation, reputation matters. Who you were before entering this place still defines how you're perceived inside it. And for some, that reputation carries power. Not visible power. Not physical control. But influence. And influence, even in silence, can shape behavior. It can trigger loyalty. It can enforce discipline. And in some cases, it can order consequences. Which raises a question that doesn't have an easy answer. If a prison is designed to eliminate control, but control still exists in hidden forms, has the system really solved the problem? Or just changed how it appears? When control breaks, incidents behind the door. Despite the structure, despite the control, incidents still happen. They're rare. But when they occur, they escalate fast. An inmate refusing orders may start with something small. A tray pushed back. A command ignored. A delay in compliance. But in this environment, even small acts carry weight. Because control must be maintained at all times. If it isn't, the entire system becomes vulnerable. So response is immediate. Officers gather. Protective gear is secured. Commands are repeated, clear, direct, final. And if those commands aren't followed, a cell extraction team is deployed. The process is precise, planned, executed in seconds. The door opens. The team moves in. Control is regained. And within minutes, everything returns to stillness. But the aftermath doesn't disappear as quickly. Because each incident adds tension. Not just for the inmate involved, but for everyone nearby. The noise. The disruption. The reminder that even in a place built for control, things can still break. And when they do, the consequences ripple outward. The guards, living between worlds. For correctional officers, this environment isn't just a workplace. It's a constant state of awareness. Every shift begins the same way: equipment checks, briefings, assignments. But no 2 days feel exactly the same. Because unpredictability isn't eliminated. It's contained. And that means it's always present, just beneath the surface. Officers must remain alert at all times. Reading behavior. Watching for changes. Noticing details others might miss. A different tone in a voice. A delayed response. An unusual movement. Because here, small changes can signal larger problems. And reacting too late isn't an option. But the pressure doesn't end when the shift does. Because unlike inmates, officers leave. They step outside. Drive home. Re-enter a world that moves freely. But the mindset doesn't switch off immediately. The vigilance lingers. The tension carries over. And over time, that separation between inside and outside becomes harder to manage. Because spending hours in an environment built on control changes how you see the world beyond it. Long-term isolation, what years do to a person. Days are difficult. Months are heavy. But years inside a Supermax cell create something else entirely. Inmates who spend extended time in isolation often change in ways that aren't immediately visible. Speech patterns shift. Some talk less. Others talk to themselves. Eye contact becomes uncomfortable. Simple interactions feel overwhelming. Because the brain has adapted to a different environment. One without social cues. Without physical presence. Without unpredictability. And when those elements are removed for long enough, reintroducing them becomes a challenge. Some inmates lose track of conversations mid-sentence. Others struggle to focus. To remember. To process. And in some cases, the changes are permanent. This is the part that often goes unseen. Because from the outside, the system appears stable. Order is maintained. Violence is reduced. But inside, the cost is harder to measure. And harder to reverse. Release, a different kind of challenge. For a small number of inmates, Supermax isn't forever. Some are transferred. Some progress through step-down programs. A few eventually return to less restrictive environments. But leaving isolation isn't simple. Because the outside world, even within another prison, feels unfamiliar. Noise becomes overwhelming. Movement feels chaotic. Interactions become unpredictable. Things most people take for granted, conversation, shared space, physical proximity, become sources of stress. Because after years of control, freedom, even in small amounts, feels unstable. And adjusting back takes time. Sometimes more time than expected. Sometimes more than the system allows. Which leads to another question. If a person adapts to isolation, what happens when that isolation is removed? The system, control versus consequence. From a structural perspective, Supermax prisons achieve their goal. They reduce violence. They contain high-risk individuals. They maintain order. But every system has trade-offs. And here, those trade-offs are not always visible. Because control is measurable. But psychological impact is not. Long-term outcomes are difficult to track. And individual experiences vary. Some endure. Some adapt. Some deteriorate. But all are affected. And that leaves a question that extends beyond these walls. Is absolute control the solution? Or just one part of a much larger problem? From a distance, this place looks quiet, organized, contained. And in many ways, it is. But inside, behind every steel door, something is happening that cannot be fully seen. Time is passing. Minds are changing. Silence is shaping something deeper than behavior. Because this isn't just about punishment. It's about endurance. About control. About what happens when human beings are placed in an environment where connection is nearly removed. And whether that environment creates stability. Or something else entirely. Because once the door closes, the system continues. The routine repeats. And the silence remains. Not loud. Not visible. But constant. And in a place built with no room for mercy, that silence may be the most powerful force of all. If this story stayed with you, then you've already seen what most people never will. A place built on silence, control, and isolation, where every day feels the same, but the effects run deeper than anyone can fully measure. There are more stories like this. More places. More realities hidden behind closed doors. Subscribe, and stay with me as we uncover them, one story at a time.